Hi, and welcome to another episode of Celebrating Small Family Businesses. Today we are celebrating Sugar and Spice in Las Vegas. And we have Sheri and John Long, and then we have their kids, Aston, Keilani, and Alexis. Welcome, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
Thank you for
Fabulous.
having
Good.
Happy to be
us.
here.
We are so glad to have you guys here with us. So, who wants to tell us the story of the? I'm guessing it's probably got to be Sheri. But how did the business get started? Like, where did Sugar and Spice come from?
Sugar and Spice began as a teacher side hustle in Southern California. At the time, I was working with at-risk high school students. I was working with these kids out of the classroom, so they were in an alternative high school diploma program. And I was working to help these kids find housing, find jobs, set up bank accounts. What I discovered while I was working with these kids is the majority of them were foster youth that had aged out of the system at age 18, and they kind of were left to their own devices at that point. So when we left Southern California and moved to Nevada, and this teacher side hustle became a full-time endeavor, I opened it with the intent to bring those kids in and hire those kids. So since
Wow.
then, we've worked with different organizations and workforce development programs, and I have kids come in that are foster youth that have aged out, and many of them also have developmental disabilities. A lot of them, most of them, on the autism spectrum.
Right.
So it's been well, that was 2017 and started in Nevada in 2019.
Wonderful. What a mission. Wow.
And right
And
before COVID.
And right before COVID, exactly. That was a whole story in and of itself. Yeah.
and your primary product is peanut butter balls that are coated in chocolate. Is that right?
We do gourmet chocolate peanut butter balls in two sizes. We have 4 count boxes and 12 count boxes. People always ask if is that all you do? And it is. I would say we are a one product operation. However, Keilani and I did do some R&D and try different flavors, and the general consensus was that they were liked. It's just a matter of the time to perfect it and reprint boxes and ingredient labels and whatnot. So we did add some flavors. Keilani, we did butter rum, banana,
Banana peanut butter, which actually went quite well with it.
coffee,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and we added a protein powder to try it
Mhm.
out. And they were liked. It's just the time involved. There's only so many hours in the day, and so right now they're just straight up peanut butter balls. They have a smooth chocolate on the outside, and we always say surprise crunch on the inside.
Ah, all right. Well, I think you've won some awards too. I remember from your website, you've won several awards in the Las Vegas area for best of this and that, right?
Yeah, just this past Saturday they announced Best of Las Vegas 2024, and we placed
Wow.
gold in the Chocolatier category. So that was exciting. We're 3 years running now for Best of Las Vegas, and it's humbling when a small business wins, and we've got other larger candy locations all over. So that was exciting. And in this town, it's huge bragging rights. So yeah, that was really fun. It comes out and it's a big deal. Everyone looks to see who won for this year, and so we are Best of Las Vegas Chocolatier.
Wonderful.
Cool.
And the award that I won for the local Autism Foundation, we were recognized as the community partner in working with their workforce development program and bringing in the kids with autism to work in our program. So that was exciting. I received a grant for training from Manufacture Nevada recently, so they're working with me on. We're doing some sales and marketing and some financial training and learning QuickBooks, which is completely foreign to me. Um, so yeah, so there's been quite a bit. It's been exciting.
That is fantastic. Well, so our big question, since we're talking about family business, is what do you love about working with family? And we got a lot of voices here. So Who wants to start?
I'll
I'll
start.
start.
Yes, sir.
Okay, he'll
Oh,
start.
excuse me. Either the princess or the one with the different hats here can go. Do you want to go first, then, Keilani?
I'll go
Keilani, go
ahead.
for it.
Um,
Okay, go
we
ahead.
get a lot of time to like bond together when we're working. We just like, I mean, we'll just be talking, and I feel like even though we're already family, like we get to know each other better and like stay caught up with each other's lives and stuff. And we'll play like little games while we're working and stuff, and it's really fun in that sense.
We've got a shared curated playlist that has everyone's music taste. That's usually playing in the background.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think so too. Like it's created a lot of time where we'll be across from each other and we're in a big commercial kitchen space, but we're across from each other at the tables and conversations happen. You know, you're
Yeah.
making peanut butter balls and there's a lot of conversation that happens.
Well, and on my end, I think being able to pull together and be a part of the success through the business, starting out in the very beginning, learning how to fold the boxes, which boxes are going to work, all the research, or the research and development that my wife Sheri had to go through, and what about this one and this, and so we knew how to do this one, and then we knew how to do another one, and as it evolved, and as the product was starting to change and get dynamic, and then making a commercial kitchen out of rented space and going through the process of that and doing the floors that were acceptable and passing inspection and investing all that time and effort into it, and then seeing all the fruit of the labor coming into when now I walk into the kitchen and she has this workforce and they're just knocking this out, and the people are in the commercial kitchen and you see the joy that they are achieving a lot, and it warms your heart to see that these young individuals are working in an employed state and they're being compensated as well, and the feeling of being able to be successful in their endeavor and then see what the finished product is, it's very nice to see that. I drop in from time to time when my delivery boy hat goes on, when it's not the IT, which we've been having difficulties on our internet, but I do the financial things and a whole variety of things, but seeing what it takes to pull it together. And I think as a family to be able to do that for each other and for, mama, and seeing the success that follows along with it and what we have for hopes in the future, I think it's a very pleasant experience for our children, and to see how a business grows. And our children are very much the go-getters in life, and they are looking to have successful careers in their fields as well. So I think it's a beautiful example of how the good work pulls together, and there's a lot of reward involved with it as well.
I completely
think-
agree
Well
that
said.
she's a good influence on how to run a business and deal with other people and stuff.
And I will say, when we have to, combat, hurdles that come our way, being able to have so many different perspectives helps with troubleshooting. And we were able to bounce ideas off each other. And I'm thinking, what about if we try this? Well, I actually was thinking this. And so that's been very helpful just to have us all as a family in that sense as well.
I think
one of the
everybody's
coolest parts
paid
is
attention to things that you wouldn't normally pay attention to either. Like the kids open when we were trying to master the box, the kids would open a pizza box and they'd be like, "Well, Mom, what about if we made it like this?" Or just thing you never really paid attention to. They'd come home with saved boxes, a cookie box, and be like, "Well, I looked at this box," or Aston was at a Starbucks and took a picture of something and sent it to me. So things that you wouldn't even normally pay attention to, I think as a whole, we kind of look at how things are designed in a whole new light too.
Cool. Aston, you were trying to get in there.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about how, like, one of the coolest things, I think, at least for me, is we've been in this for such a long time now, to look back and just see how far we've come. We're always constantly working so hard, and to kind of just stop the moments where, like the kitchen, for example, we walk into the kitchen and you see a whole factory line, and these kids are hard at work, and it's like, years ago, this was just an empty building, and we kind of built all of it, and it's just to kind of step back and watch everything and really see what we've built, I feel like is one of the coolest parts of it all.
And I will say they point that out to me a lot because I'm so in the moment. They'll be like, Mom, this is your kitchen. Like, this is like, look. And so sometimes I have to step back because they'll walk in and just kind of look around and sort of, this is our space here. Like, so sometimes it kind of, I'm just so like, go, get it done. Focus on what that they sort of sometimes bring me down and, look at what we've created here.
Yeah, measuring progress, updating. Being present, like being in the moment. Yeah, you got to do that to get it done. But how
appreciating what you've come,
measuring that
Realizing
progress
how
and
much you've
appreciating it.
accomplished is important.
Yeah.
Say that
Absolutely.
again, Keilani.
And realizing how much you've accomplished is important too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just recently,
We push
AJ has recently stepped up into the sales market as well. Some of the local contacts here, bigger companies, Aston is developing a nice way of presenting a sales pitch and being able to go in as the closer when my wife gets the clientele, and he's able to draw them in further and get an opportunity for a trial. And so he's contributing more and more on that end. So it's nice to have the businessman in the setting as well.
I think everyone kind of it's been a learning experience in that everyone kind of has their role and their strengths. And when you're running the whole show and Keilani has this brain that can look at a flat template of a box and figure out what it'll do once it's folded. My mind does not work like this. So I would get these templates from the printer and I'd be lost, and she would look at it and say, no, you need to have this, and this, and these tabs, and then it'll fold. And okay, and I'd send it back and they'd send me something else, and I'd be like, how about this? And she'd be like, no, but this piece needs to, whereas my brain doesn't do that. So I'm like, you're the director of packaging,
We definitely work together and benefit each other in that way too. Like we have different minds, so we see different things.
Definitely. I am not a social media guru, and I know that social media is huge. And I look at Instagram and just want to start crying half the time. So I'll send Alexis things and say, "Can you put this on there and share this and tag this?" And and I'm like, "Okay, we now have the manager of social media." And then it comes to sales, and I'm kind of hemming and hawing, and I can't get something in a location. And I'll tell Aston, okay, call him, make it happen. And he'll get off the phone and say, okay, go deliver tomorrow, So I think we all kind of have our strengths and we put those into play. And it's been very, very helpful.
And did you know those strengths beforehand, or did you kind of figure them out on the fly as you had problems to solve together?
I think more than ever, we kind of had no choice. It was sort of brought out of us. So even if we had these strengths before this, I mean, especially just growing up, we were younger when the business started, but I think kind of having no choice but to look at each other's perspectives, and even though we might all be part of the same family, we're very different people. So when we all kind of come together, we have no choice but to sort of rely on each other in the areas that we lack, and it kind of just brings us all up together.
I think working as a family, let me just add this, sweetie, and then you can go. I think working as a family syntax is very important because initially it wasn't, would you like to go to the kitchen and help me today? It's, you'll be going to the kitchen and helping me today.
No, I always made it a choice. I never did that. I always made it a choice. And I did that on purpose because I never wanted it to be a resentful situation. Like I have to go work for my mom or I have to do this. So it was always I always made it an option or a choice. And I think that is what also pulled out strengths because Keilani was the one that chose to come to the kitchen and do the physical creation of a product, while Alexis did the behind the scenes and AJ's the people person. So I always made it a choice of, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Now, sometimes I'm like, okay, now I really need you to call and get this location and close the sale, but they're also older now. So I think they see it, they get it more now. And then, when the computer breaks, the IT guy steps in and, when there's plumbing issues, the plumber arrives at the kitchen, and
And then, of course, we're coming to the end of the year, so taxes are due.
so the accountant is here.
And I'd also
A
say
lot
the
of hats.
business definitely allows us to like combine our strengths and work together like that.
Yeah.
How do you, when you say combine, you mean in a general sense, or do you mean like something to do maybe like the boxes where you found a way to combine
Well,
that way?
I'd say that, like, we each kind of have our own section of the business. So, like she said, like, I'm the packaging manager, Aston does the sales, Alexis is like the social
Pros
media and
lady.
stuff. So
There we go.
we can all like work together to make it a whole and succeed like that.
I think it kind of goes both ways with that because if you look at the business as a whole, without each of us, I feel like we're all kind of crucial in our own way. So the business would suffer a lot without each of our strengths. But then also with individual things like sometimes Keilani and I will be trying to find a more efficient way to do this or that. And I can't figure it out and she can't figure it out. And then when we sit down together and look at something, our strengths kind of come together on something in like a smaller aspect as well. So it kind of goes both ways.
Nice.
That's a
Totally.
good
Yeah,
point.
that's what I was wondering. Yeah. So hopefully all these things that you're figuring out and documenting that you're documenting them also that because someday you're going to might need to replace yourself as
Right.
you move on to something else.
Well, and that
I, go ahead.
with the boxes and that, I always told the kids, when it gets into the big factory and you're in the supervisory position, I say Keilani can walk up there and say, "Oh, it's a little bit more efficient if you do it this way," because she's learned everything from the ground up, right? I mean, that makes a great manager if you've done all the jobs yourself and you know exactly what it is and what the little tweaks and tricks are.
And I
Totally.
think to what age is, I think you think of things, different people think of different things. For example, he called one location to see if they would take product and sell them. And they kind of hemmed and hawed, oh, we're not interested, we're not really sure. And had I been on the phone, I would have said, okay, well, maybe, another time, and gotten off the phone, put my tail between my legs and left. And, when they came back with, we're not really sure we want peanut products, he was so quick on his feet and said, well, I have noticed that you have Reese's and Snickers, and both of those are peanut products. And that was such, like, I can't even think that fast. So I think it's just different thoughts and different brains, and you just think differently, and it comes together and really
Yeah,
creates something.
100%.
What'd you say, Keilani? I missed you. I missed it.
100%. I totally agree with that.
Ah,
Yeah.
oh, that's what teamwork. I
Exactly.
mean, the fact that you guys have just kind of figured this out naturally. Some families go decades and they don't figure this out and getting the roles right, getting the roles straight, and figuring out strengths. And so, my hat's off to you all. This is
And letting each
fabulous.
other grow where you need to grow. That's
And I think it's
kudos
helpful.
to you two. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Does
mean,
your teacher background, Sheri? Does your teacher background really? Did it really lend itself well to bringing your kids into the business?
Oh, tremendously, tremendously. I think I pulled them in probably the same way I would teach. Is like we're going to find your strength, and we're gonna focus on your strength. I think when I was teaching, I don't want to say I made learning a choice, because these kids are forced to go to school and they have to be there. But I had a way of making my students responsible for their learning, and I would say that with my own kids. Making it a choice and having them see their strengths and realize that they're good at this or they're good at that, and they can really benefit the business. I think was definitely a teacher background. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's helped them in other ways. Alexis has gone on with working with marketing and with Sugar and Spice. She's gone on and she's in the process of creating a group on her college campus right now, completely unrelated, but still with the background that she learned or took with her to school. I think
And you, being a
AJ
teacher, you
and what?
definitely practice leadership, like to take control when no one else will. That's a big aspect that you pass down to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to kind of take the bull by the horns and make something happen. And I think all three of my kids have seen that. And that's, I mean, I think part of it's probably personality, but I think a lot of it kind of came out in a step back and teach kind of mode as well. Aston's working right now, and like John said, he's doing sales, and I think it sort of transfers over. So I think they've been able to take what they've learned and kind of put it in areas of their own lives too.
Yeah, when you can learn and take some risks and make mistakes and it's still okay and it's safe, then you have much more self-confidence to try new things and to transfer those skills, because there's so much transferable skills I'm hearing here that just goes on in other areas of life and other businesses.
Do I miss the classroom? No. Will I ever go back to teaching? No. But I always joke that my classroom has morphed into a large commercial kitchen, and it's still happening.
There you
go. Yeah.
We still have an educator in the works. I'm on my year 31 of teaching. So I keep talking to the boss over here who, supplies my big paychecks for me. When are we going to explode so I can get into retirement mode for my first occupation and get in here full time?
Cool.
One of our questions that we like to ask is about a challenge you've overcome. And you talked about the little growing pains, but you had a pretty big challenge a few years ago with COVID, and you guys are in a food manufacturing plant. So tell us about how you weathered that storm.
So I actually couldn't even think of a challenge. And Keilani said, Keilani was like, I think it was when COVID was around. I had COVID I was down for 6 weeks, completely down. Probably should have been hospitalized, but I wasn't. I was quarantined to the upstairs bedroom. So for 6 weeks, I was not in production. I was not doing invoicing. I mean, I couldn't even get out of bed. It was a challenge just to walk to the bathroom. So they took over. Alexis, you did the balls. Keilani was helping with the balls and the packaging. AJ was making boxes. Alexis, like at one point, I was walking her through how to complete an invoice to invoice one of the hotels out here. And she said, "Oh, I didn't know you did all this." And I was like, "Yeah." So she became pretty adept at invoicing. When checks came in, I was talking her through how to, mark it as a paid invoice. And then he was delivering. So I was literally in bed down for 6 weeks, and they ran everything. And that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I'd say it was a really big challenge. And more than ever, we had to learn to each do our part. I mean, of course, excluding Sheri because she couldn't help out with us. But we were really connected at that point because we totally had to work together.
I mean, I remember getting a report. How many
we were talking about earlier.
Go ahead, Aston.
Go ahead, Aston.
Like earlier, we were talking about kind of how our strengths come together, and this was like a prime example of that. I mean, it went beyond.
Ultimate test.
I know she likes to say we had a choice. I would argue that during COVID we did not have a choice, but it was we. Okay, I mean, we had no choice. We had. So we sort of had no choice but to sort of come together, and if we didn't, the business was not going to continue to thrive, and it was definitely a challenge, but we learned a lot. We grew closer because of it, and ultimately we were able to come together and make it happen.
There was probably some bribery in there at that point. If you pulled 100 boxes, then something came with it. But yeah.
There were bonuses to that minor salary at that time.
There you go.
I mean,
well, hard times bring hard choices too.
Yeah, Keilani just brought up the other day. She said, "Remember when it was a snow cone or a McDonald's sundae for pay?" I said, "Yeah, I remember that."
Exactly. It was very worth it, though.
Cool.
Yeah, so I would say that was probably the biggest. That was a huge hurdle in the way of challenges, and just I mean, when you're a small business and you don't have other people to run the show. It was a matter. I couldn't just go out for 6 weeks. So it was a matter of keeping things going, and I was completely hands off at that point.
But that was a really.
I would say that was the biggest challenge. But other challenges that we've had was like the first time that there was considerably larger order that would come in, and it's like, oh my goodness, So we have to get the boxes ready. We have to have enough of the ingredients. We have to get it together. I have to have time to, create the product and then get it packaged and then get the invoices and everything. And when it was a quick turnaround, so that was, you work well under pressure, and we got a taste of what the pressure was like in those moments as well. And that's when you really got to stay level-headed and pull together. And I would say those times makes you a lot more efficient. And that
that was
I think that transfers over with the organization, and then also with the teaching background as far as organizing things. Like you would organize a lesson, everybody has a component that goes together that's going to pull together for your finished product. And a lot of things in education, that's what we're trying to get the young people to do, is work together and have an understanding as to how they play a certain part in the overall each piece, and that makes us successful in the end.
Keilani, what were you going to add?
It was such a difficult time for us, so I think it's definitely proof that if anything like that ever happened again, or if the rest of us had to run the business, then we could definitely do it.
Absolutely.
Oh, and you guys are older now too, so I could see. I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, let's hope it never does, but I think even being older now, you could definitely take over.
Yeah, it's huge self-confidence boost. That kind of goes back with that, mention of keeping track of your accomplishments. That's one of those things you can do. Like, you went through that, so it goes
right.
on the list.
And a well-run business, if the owner has to step out for some reason, everybody else can pull it together.
And I feel confident
Right.
now that if that were to happen, if for some reason I had to leave or step out or travel and get whatever, I feel confident that they could do it. They could do it.
Right. Well, they did it for
Nice.
the 18 months to 2 years of COVID. So kudos to all of you.
And that was probably, I mean, that it was me having COVID, but was with having a food product and being in a tourism city, it was a challenge keeping things going also because all of my hotels shut down. I have a lot of the coffee locations in the hospitals, and obviously those were closed without visitors in the hospitals. The airport, all my stores in the airport, if no one's flying, my stores in the airport weren't taking product.
Wow.
So it was a challenge in terms of losing a lot of locations that either were shut down or closed or didn't come back after COVID.
And then having to reestablish relationships with the different companies and finding new locations. And she wore out some shoes hitting the pavement. She was really having to hustle and come up. And still, it's a constant that she's constantly getting out there, and she's getting more notoriety, and people are seeing the product, and she's getting reorders from people from different functions, different places that they've seen them. They're in venues where there's sporting events, and that's starting to come to fruition, and it's starting really to grow. So I'm waiting for the explosion.
Do you have a corporate gift part of your business, or where okay?
Yeah, I do.
We've got
Yeah, I've done quite a few construction company and real estate. I just did an IT company. And one of the things that I do, if they want it, is I'm always willing to co-brand with companies too. So if they provide me with ribbon or stickers or things, I'm happy to share in the, in the product. So I've done some co-branding with some companies, and we put both of our names or our logos on the box somehow and
Perfect.
make it work. And I love cross promoting, especially if it's a fellow small business. I love helping them out. If they're going to buy product and get it out there, then I'm more than happy to put their logo on my box.
Yeah, because that IT guy is not sitting back there rolling peanut butter balls.
He might be rolling something else.
Exactly. But they're not. Yeah, right. But what a wonderful thing of that smart cross branding, because a lot of people don't understand that what it helps everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love cross promoting. I feel like it's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Alexis is being on social media and the social media manager that she is. She'll find things or places online or posts, and she'll send them to me and say, "Hey, can we do something with this? Or do you want to contact them? Or should we reach out to them?" Or so it's sometimes finding those leads too. So she'll find the leads, and I'll contact them, and then I'll have Aston close the deal, and Keilani will the box is good to go. It's a win-win for everybody.
And also with the website too, where it shows where the product is, and so that's giving promotion for the different venues that she is in, especially with the smaller businesses, some of the coffee establishments,
Local,
a local owned small business, and it's like the product can be found in these locations, and you see that on the website. And especially for we appreciate the local draw of the people, and if they can seek her product at a coffee shop, at a butcher shop, at different things like that, and that is helping to promote the other people too. It starts tumbling and tumbling and tumbling, and there's more and more orders that are coming from those venues for her, and as a result, they see, hey, these people are coming in, they're asking for it. It's also drawing in their business as well.
Right.
So, great.
And if you're running links from your website to those locations, and they're getting a backlink to their website, and that's also good for them. Nice.
Yeah, and they do. I have links for different small coffee shops, winery, gifting. I work with some gift basket type locations, and it's people think of Vegas as big, and once you're in it, it's really, especially as a small business, it's a very supportive city of small business, and it's really just not that big. We all run in the same circles, and so I'm friends with a basket lady who uses cookies and peanut butter balls and puts them all in her gift baskets. I find that everyone kind of tries to help each other out and lift each other up. People think of Vegas as big, but I think in the small business world in Vegas, we all run in the same circles, and I think everyone's pretty supportive.
That makes sense, because you've got really two economies. You've got the strip economy, the big nationwide advertising on tourism, and then you've got the rest of the city.
Yeah.
And the people who live there and work there.
And there's also a big difference between my wholesale sales and my consumer direct sales too. So I kind of go in both directions because I guess the nature of the city that we're in.
Sheri, through some organizations, had some invitations to when F1 was first getting established. She did she had an area where she was helping with the media people that were coming
Super Bowl.
Well, for F1, the media coverage, and they were there and got to know her product and things like that. It was a big shindig for all of them, and then with the Super Bowl too. And as a side product,
there was the Business Connect program comes into the host city, and I think they had 700 applicants. They found 200 small businesses. They vet those businesses, and then they put them in a manual, I guess you could call it, for the host committee to come into town. And here's 200 small businesses, and they were everything: photography, videography, balloons, flowers, you name it. So I made that. What is it? What was it? It was a
catalog,
I guess, of businesses, and I was one of the 200 that were in there. And then what John was talking about was the media event that they hosted when they welcomed everybody, and they had the small businesses participate in that media event, and they either did the decorations or we had our food products there and whatnot. And then they did a lot of small business like conference type situations. They taught us about cybersecurity. They gave us a little talk on marketing. It was just sort of like the host committee and the Super Bowl came together, and they just wanted to train these small businesses on various aspects of being a business. And at the very end, the very last one was kind of like a hoorah, the Super Bowl's coming, you guys made it this far, this is awesome. And they raffled off 2 tickets to the Super Bowl.
Congratulations.
Fabulous.
Wow.
So Sugar and Spice took those tickets, and I brought them home, and Alexis videoed me, telling him that he won these tickets. And how many views were on that video, Alexis?
It got up pretty high. Yes, that sounds about right. I haven't looked recently. I mean, it was a while ago,
I think it was
but
60 or 80,000 views. Yeah.
It was crazy.
Wow.
I mean, just coming home and telling my husband, guess what? I walked in with an NFL bag. It was like a duffel bag.
Yeah.
And I said, look at this cool bag I won. And it had the NFL logo. And he thought that was just the neatest thing because it was the official NFL duffel bag. And I said, but wait, look what's inside of it. And I opened it up and pulled out those, massive, like, life-size.
Which are right there behind you.
And it was, his mouth just dropped. And so, in my head, I'm thinking I could buy a new house with this. But he's like,
My question was, are you going to take me?
I said,
I was going to say, there's a whole room here.
I think if I didn't take him, it would have been grounds for divorce. So yeah, that was fun. And that was as a result of being a small business here in Las Vegas.
There you go. And you never know where something like that's going to show up.
Oh, and that's an asset that just continues, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
you can re-promote that too, can't you, Alexis?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was definitely a perk.
Cool.
Well, so our final question, I guess, is what's next?
Yeah.
What do you see
Expansion.
next for the company?
Wait, what did you say, Jake?
That was quick.
I said expansion.
Instances.
Expansion. But okay, so if someone asks you that, they know the answer to this. What's been the goal for me from the get-go?
Ready? 1.
Should we say it on 3?
Yes.
Starbucks.
Starbucks.
Yeah.
My goal
smart.
from the get-go has been to get Sugar and Spice peanut butter balls, our little 4-count boxes, into Starbucks. And Aston was in one once, and there was this little tray in the 4x4 space by the register, and he took a picture and said, "Mom, your product would fit perfect here." And I'm in, you name a coffee house in this town, and I've either contacted them or they carry my product. So the goal has always been Starbucks. And I think with that would be to get beyond the confines of Vegas. I'd love to how many independent coffee houses are in this country, right?
You have to also give yourself the credit you have. You were in Texas for a while. You had a coffee shop in Manhattan.
You're in Manhattan.
Yes. Yeah. So the growth is coming at a very quick speed.
Yeah. Texas and Manhattan, he had a coffee shop here, and he sold this coffee shop and opened a place in Manhattan and still wanted them. So they were shipped to Manhattan.
Wonderful.
Them to New York. And then Texas, she found, I don't know, Alexis, that was an online, she found us.
Yeah. She, I think, had seen one of our posts that had gotten to a larger audience and said, "Yeah, I run this cheese shop. These would be a great addition." And we said, "Okay, let's do it."
Yeah.
Which city in Texas? I'm curious.
Round Rock.
Round Rock.
Yeah, I think so. I want to say
little.
yes. It's very little.
Yeah. Tiny little. It's like they're known for some huge antique show that they have every year.
Yes. It's a huge thing.
See?
There you go.
Tony knows.
Now, if you go there, you'll probably see her product.
Yeah.
There you go.
So yeah,
I'd rather come to Vegas.
Come to Vegas. I'd love to get beyond the confines of
Sure.
Vegas, Nevada. I'm in Reno up north and Mesquite, but just to get beyond Nevada and move into other locations would be
It sounds like it's coming, and you got a team behind you.
Well,
I think we're only one national contract away.
Okay. I like that thought.
Like, no
That's
matter
a great
what
way
it
to
is,
look
I
at it.
think that's the big break we need. We're expanding rapidly, but we've got some things that are, in talking stages of regional and that. And I think just one national contract with a chain of stores or whatever it may be will just kind of get us out there so much, and it'll just take off from there to, everywhere you go, Sugar and Spice.
And we are in some locations here regionally. We're in Total Wine and their distribution centers aren't really set up for food right now, and they're back east, and so there's some logistics in there. Um, but I'd love to think that eventually we could move into other Total Wine locations, or other hotel. I mean, a lot of the hotels obviously have other hotels, and
Yeah, there's one particular chain that is known for their cookies. If you could get into another chain,
DoubleTree.
right.
Yeah,
my-
right,
they
DoubleTree.
know those cookies.
Yeah.
But to go into another brand and say, put your name on there, and there
Yeah.
you go.
And that's what
That
I
would
would love. I would love to just, like Aston said, get some sort of national
Well,
distribution.
that coming from our up and coming salesman there, I think he just
Your
Found
sales
his next
department's
crush.
on it.
I think I got some work to do.
Yeah,
He could do it.
Yes, you do.
He could do it.
networking.
And I'd say if she did get to that point, then it's definitely
When?
like, yeah, when she gets to that point, it's definitely like a watermark for both businesses, because obviously we know the DoubleTree cookies. We've visited tons of DoubleTrees while traveling and stuff, so that would be a great opportunity for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes
It
I
has
think it's
been.
just I've always been a strong believer that the right people come at the right time.
Correct.
And so sometimes I think it's just I've always felt like there's something big around the corner, and little baby steps are setting me up along the way. So sometimes I think it's just being patient, and just trusting that the right people or the right opportunity will present itself at the right time.
Well, it's hard to go from a crawling stage to a full run. There's a lot that has to happen, right?
Right.
And so it sounds like you all are in that starting to stand up and getting ready to rock out.
And
Yeah.
I will say we celebrate together too. I mean, I just got a massive order from one of the hotels for a Valentine's event that they're doing. And I came home and I said, it's 700 boxes. And then I say, they upped it to 1,100. And then like that afternoon, now they want 1,200, and so we celebrate together too, I think. And
I think that's what also fuels us, is celebrating the little wins. It keeps us going, keeps us encouraged, and does show us how far we have come.
And it's not even really us celebrating the bigger win, or I mean the little wins. It's us celebrating one step closer to the bigger picture. Even if it's not necessarily that we're excited about the 1,200 box order. We're excited that 1,200 people are going to see the product. So it's like, even though we celebrate the small things, it's because we have that big picture in mind.
Definitely.
And it's going to be more than 1,200. It's exponentially. They're going to show their
Absolutely.
friends. They're going to show their family. And it's going to explode. So kudos to all of you.
Good thinking there. That frame, it's what does it mean? Where does it lead?
Right.
Awesome. What a great way to. I'm looking forward to sharing this episode. I think there's just
Yes.
a lot of lessons here for other businesses to
Is there
learn.
anything else anybody'd like to say before we?
I have a question for the two of you. I mean, obviously, you guys have talked to so many other families. What advice do you have? What do you guys have to say?
In general, or in a particular?
I mean, I
area?
guess what advice would you have to us, to the business?
Mostly, I say keep doing what you're doing. Communicate. That's the number one issue in a small family business, is communication. Because we bring in past with us when we come in, but we can deal with what is now and go forward. And it sounds like you all are doing a great job on doing that. So continue that.
Yeah, keep doing what works.
Keep
do
talking.
more of what works and less of what doesn't. That's
Yeah.
a really, really simple principle, but
Good mindset.
it's solid.
Yeah. And listen, and the whole thing about, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and listen on that too, because that's another thing that's really important. not only knowing where you're coming from, but listening to where somebody else is coming in.
And I think I always seem to, maybe it's the teacher in me. I always say I'm like the eternal learner. I'm always pulling in from other businesses and, picking their brain about how they did something or what they learned. So, Alexis, share our social media.
Yes, sure. So we are on Instagram is our biggest platform right now. Our handle is at Sugar and Spice Las Vegas. And you can find us on there with all of our announcements, updates, sales, promo codes, new locations. It's a good way to stay connected and see what we're doing.
Good. And we'll also have all this in the show notes.
Yeah, so
Perfect.
make sure your website,
any email addresses, any of that stuff that you'd like to do.
You can find us on pretty much all platforms. Sheri's big on LinkedIn, and then Facebook and TikTok as well.
Okay,
Cool.
We'll be sure to get the TikTok. I'm not. I don't think I've ever been on TikTok, so I have to get the address. Or like how
It
to
should
do
be
that.
the same, right? Same
Is
Yeah.
handle for everything.
It is the same handle, yes.
Well, Sugar and Spice.
Well
Las
done.
Vegas.
Yes.
Well,
You're gonna have to plan a trip to come out here and visit us. And
looking forward
That's
to
what
it.
I'm saying.
I mean, this city, there's more to do than just the
We
gamble.
know. Yes.
Then eat
We can also buy peanut butter balls.
peanut butter balls and see the
Yes.
sights at the same time.
That's right. Yes. Thank you so much for taking your time out and joining
for all
us.
Thank
getting
you for
together
having
to
us.
do
It
this.
was fun.
Yeah, thank you for
You're so
having
welcome.
us.
It's nice to meet you all, and we are so looking forward to seeing the continued
Yes.
growth of Sugar and Spice.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see you in my Starbucks here in Tampa.
There
Yes.
you go.
Or the
Keep
Total
your eyes
Wine that's right
open.
across
Or the
the street.
Total Wine is right across. Oh, I could go to Total Wine and then come back to the Starbucks and go back. Yeah.
Chocolate and peanut butter balls, wine and peanut butter balls. What better combination?
Coffee and
right.
peanut butter balls.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Well,
All
thanks
right. Well,
again.
thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We're off